Imagine a landscape where once thriving streets have turned into a cacophony of sirens, screams, and gunfire, a place where the air stinks of smoke and despair, thickened by the presence of war machinery and the aroma of death. This was Stalingrad, a name whispered in reverence and horror, forever etched into the annals of World War II history. How did it come to be the bloodiest battle of this monumental conflict? What transpired in this city on the Volga that left over 1 million lives lost and an entire world transfixed? Stick with us, for in the next few minutes, we will uncover this staggering saga of courage, strategy, and sheer human determination that not only shaped the trajectory of the war but also altered the course of human history. To truly understand the Battle of Stalingrad, we have to go back to the summer of 1942. The Axis forces, under the command of Nazi Germany, were riding high on a wave of unprecedented success. The Wehrmacht had swept through Europe, capturing territory after territory, and as they turned their gaze toward the east, it seemed as if nothing could stand in their way. Their ominous strategy was to seize the oil-rich regions of the Caucasus, but first, they knew they must capture Stalingrad, a city named after the very leader they aimed to dethrone. But here's something you didn't expect: Stalingrad was not just a strategic point on a map. It was a symbol, a testament to Soviet resilience, and a name that conjured the awe of industrial progress. As Hitler ordered his troops to take the city, he was not only seeking its resources, he was aiming to deal a psychological blow to the Soviet Union. The fate of millions hinged on this city, a place that would become synonymous with the gritty reality of urban warfare. The Wehrmacht entered Stalingrad in August, intending to capture it by September. What they encountered was not the quick victory they imagined. Instead, they faced fierce resistance from the Red Army and civilian volunteers, all determined to defend their motherland. You might be wondering how a city could withstand the full force of the Nazi war machine. The truth is, it was revolutionized by a combination of desperate patriotism and flawed military strategy. As the Germans advanced, the Soviets shifted their tactics from open battle to a strategy known as hugging the enemy. This method, while counterintuitive, was effective. Soviet troops would engage the enemy at close range, using the rubble of the city as cover, turning buildings into fortresses and streets into battlegrounds. Suddenly, the cityscape that the Germans believed would give them a decisive advantage became their worst nightmare. Every corner harbored snipers, every basement an ambush point. What could possibly turn the tide for the defenders? The fall of Stalingrad was not just about strategy and tactics, it was about heart and determination. Teams of soldiers were prepared to defend every inch of their ground and willing to fight to the bitter end. Women and children played a crucial role, too, providing support and participating actively in the defense. The resilience of the civilians was astounding. They transformed factories into makeshift barricades, channeling their fear and anger into unwavering resolve. Resistance stiffened as each day turned into night, and the Soviet morale soared against the German might, which was starting to feel like a behemoth with feet of clay. And here comes another fascinating twist. As the battle dragged on, the Germans found themselves coming to terms with something unexpected: the harshness of the Russian winter. Those cold months that turned into a frigid nightmare strained resources, both material and moral. Temperatures plummeted so low that even tanks struggled to function. Soldiers, instead of aiming their rifles, were using their hands to simply stay warm. This was no longer just a battle for a city, it had morphed into a fight for survival itself. By November 1942, as conditions deteriorated, the Soviets conceived a daring counteroffensive nicknamed Operation Uranus. But what did they have that the Germans underestimated? They had poor German defensive lines, stretched thin and poorly equipped. The Soviets were secretly training and gathering troops, fresh, determined forces ready to reclaim their city. What would happen next would shake the foundations of the Nazi regime. As the night of November 19th descended, Soviet forces launched a massive surprise attack, encircling the German Sixth Army. In the ensuing fog of war, the Operation Uranus became a stunning success. What had once been unfathomable, the encirclement of a key German army, was now a reality. The Wehrmacht, once deemed invincible, found themselves in a precarious position. They were cut off from supplies, and morale plummeted as they quickly realized that their situation was dire. But the Germans would not be broken easily. What emerged next was a standoff where defiance clashed with despair. Soviet commanders quickly understood they had the Germans on the ropes, and the immediate focus shifted to holding the encirclement. But just when it seemed that victory was inevitable, the question arose: how to deal with the entrenched enemy? It was a chess game played on a bloody board, and the stakes were higher than ever as the city faced further devastation during the following months of intense fighting. In January 1943, as the winter displayed its full ferocity, the Germans were still determined to break free, launching desperate attempts to claw their way out of encirclement. What they faced, though, was a determined Soviet army united by purpose. You may ask yourself how a wartime strategy can be rewritten in the thick of battle. The Soviets capitalized on every opportunity to disrupt German efforts. Using snipers, artillery, and the bitter cold to their advantage, they thwarted each advance relentlessly. By February 1943, the once proud German army in Stalingrad was on the brink of collapse. A broken army, suffering from starvation and hypothermia, was finally pieced back together, and on February 2nd, the remnants of the 6th Army surrendered. What was left was a grisly testament to the ferocity of the conflict. The ruins of Stalingrad stood as a haunting symbol of suffering and endurance. In the streets where echoes of gunfire once dominated, silence fell, marked only by the devastating realization of the price paid. But even with the surrender of the 6th Army and a resounding Soviet victory, the battle's repercussions would resonate for years, a psychological blow to the Germans and a sigh of relief for the Soviets. In that horrific tableau of war, Stalingrad crystallized the mantra that would resonate through the Soviets and beyond: not one step back. What had begun as a bid for territory and supremacy had evolved into an epic clash of wills, where human tenacity and strategic brilliance would forever alter the course of the war. Viewer, if you think the battle ends here, you're mistaken. The Battle of Stalingrad was not merely an isolated conflict. It sent ripples across the globe, influencing military strategies and shaping public sentiments on an unprecedented scale. What lessons did the world learn from the horrors faced in this urban hellscape? How did this intense humanitarian and military dilemma shift the power dynamics of World War II? Thus far, we have only skimmed the surface of Stalingrad. As we delve deeper, you'll uncover the stark realities of lives lost, ordinary individuals whose names might not fill history books but whose stories stand testament to human courage. The aftermath of Stalingrad reverberated far beyond its borders. From shifting alliances to the changing landscape of warfare, the battle paved the way for subsequent military engagements. Stay with us as we transition to the remaining lessons: remembrance, exploration, and the indelible mark left by a brutal standoff that epitomized the darkest chapters in human history. Because what comes next will leave you speechless: an exploration into the human stories behind the numbers, the emotional scars etched into the soul of nations, and the profound shifts in faith and strategies born from the blood-soaked grounds of Stalingrad. Prepare yourself, the story is far from over. As the smoke began to clear and the last shots echoed through the wreckage of Stalingrad, the true cost of the battle became starkly apparent. Stalingrad was not merely a military defeat for the Germans, it was a crucible in which myths of invincibility were shattered. The once feared Wehrmacht had sustained catastrophic losses, and the remnants of the 6th Army surrendered, marking a turning point from which the Nazis would never fully recover. But losses were not confined to numbers. They encompassed a broader spectrum: morale, momentum, and the belief in a swift and decisive victory. Even with the immense devastation, there existed an uncomfortable pluralism of stories that started to emerge from the ashes of despair. For the soldiers on both sides, Stalingrad transformed from a series of battle sequences into an ongoing struggle against the brutal environment, relentless foes, and their inner demons. As winter caved in and temperatures dropped, psychological endurance became as valuable as physical prowess. Soldiers on the Soviet side braved the freezing drafts, rallying around their belief in socialist ideals and the indecipherable energy that surged through their ranks. They became not just a defensive line but a canvas of resilience, their sheer willpower igniting a flame that opposed the ice encasing them. Conversely, the German soldiers, accustomed to quick victories, grappled with disarray. The sun had set on their rapid advancement across Europe, giving way to confusion and despondency. As their encirclement tightened, fear flowed freely among them, fear of the elements but most of all, fear of failure. German units struggled to comprehend their newfound status as the hunted rather than the hunter. This acute sense of vulnerability gnawed at them. Reports started to pour in depicting the human cost, starvation, and loss of morale. Soldiers despaired, losing faith in their leaders' promises, desperately trying to cling to the thin thread of hope. Shouts of defiance soon devolved into whispers of surrender. Beyond the battlefield, the consequences of Stalingrad rippled outwards into the ideological realms. The Soviet propaganda machine seized upon the victory, framing it as a monumental triumph of the proletariat over fascism, a potent narrative that solidified support for the war effort. The resilience exhibited during the battle became a source of national pride, a symbol of fortitude that inspired not just soldiers but civilians across the Soviet Union. The world would learn about the Stalingrad spirit, a term that would come to signify relentless courage in the face of overwhelming adversity. The Soviets used the battle as a rallying call to enlist volunteers, recruit soldiers, and bolster morale, further fueling their war machine. On the flip side, the Nazi regime attempted to bury the defeat under layers of propaganda, but the truth seeped out despite their best efforts. Reports of the encirclement and subsequent surrender of the once mighty Sixth Army shook the foundations of the German public's faith in their leaders. It laid bare the frailty of the Third Reich. As disillusionment crept in, dissent began to surface within the ranks of the populace and the military. Questions multiplied. How could this happen? When would it end? Such queries shattered the previously ironclad image of Nazi invincibility. The aftermath of Stalingrad also sowed the seeds for resistance movements, with underground groups emerging across occupied territories, emboldened by the belief that the Nazis could indeed be defeated. The global reaction to the events at Stalingrad was marked by varied implications. Allied leaders seized upon the battlefield defeat, understanding that it signaled a shift in the balance of power. The United States and Britain drew strategic lessons from Stalingrad, re-evaluating their approaches to future offensives. The notion that the Soviet Union was a formidable force, capable of crafting a robust defense and rallying for an offensive, reshaped diplomatic dynamics. Support grew for alliances with the Soviets, leading to decisions that would have lasting impacts on post-war politics, including the eventual division of Germany. But while the strategic outcomes were significant, the human element provides a more profound perspective. Each number representing casualties tells only a fraction of the story. Beyond the statistics lay stories of immense personal loss. Families torn apart, lives extinguished in moments, the past fading before individuals could find peace in the present. The survivors, both military and civilian, brought back the scars, both visible and hidden. Many veteran soldiers returned home, physically intact yet burdened by memories encapsulated in sights and sounds that ceased to relent. The horizon would haunt them as much as the ghosts of comrades lost in the throes of battle. Cities marked by grief bore the imprints of lives upended, yet they also bore faint glimmers of future resilience. Even today, the legacy of Stalingrad remains potent, serving as a historical touchstone for discussions on warfare ethics, human rights, and the impacts of totalitarian regimes. Scholars, historians, and filmmakers have delved into the emotional complexities of the battle, striving to capture the many layers of suffering and resilience woven through the fabric of history. The notion of fighting for one's home, for one's dignity, reverberates through every retelling. One story that continues to evoke deep emotion is that of the Motherland Call statue, a colossal monument erected in Volgograd, formerly Stalingrad, standing over the site of the battle. It represents not just a tribute to the soldiers who fought for their city, but also a reminder of the cost of conflict, a beacon that signals the need for remembrance and reflection. Every year, thousands journey to honor those lost, fostering a connection to the past and reinforcing the importance of peace. In the context of our society today, Stalingrad implores us to consider the nature of warfare, the economy of hope amidst despair, and the determination innate within human beings. The battle may be historically contained, but its essence transcends time. Stalingrad compels a conversation about the responsibilities we bear towards one another in times of crisis. Every generation grapples with the lessons embedded in the ruins of our collective pasts. What choices will we make today to prevent a repeat of history's most grievous errors? As we consider the lessons imparted by Stalingrad, it bears reminding that each chapter in its narrative teaches immense compassion alongside ferocity. It reveals grand strategies and tactical errors, both ushering in horrifying destruction and showcasing unfathomable resolve. Those who fought, those who fell, and those who survived left indelible marks not only on the battlefield but on what it means to strive for human dignity in the darkest of hours. Thus, the echoes of Stalingrad will always remain, a reminder of what it means to endure, to sacrifice, and to hope against hope. As we reflect on this epic saga of resistance, we must carry forward the communal lessons of both grief and strength. In doing so, may we ensure that history is not merely remembered but learned from, never to be forgotten, and never to be repeated. And so we conclude our narrative, an exploration of bravery shaded by sorrow, an unyielding spirit dominated by the desire for justice, a story forever intertwining the courage and losses that defined one of humanity's most harrowing chapters. The battle may have ceased, but the lessons of Stalingrad live on, challenging each of us to reflect on our own moral compass, our struggles, and the relentless quest for peace. In every whisper of remembrance, we inscribe a pledge to uphold the values of compassion and cooperation, aspiring to forge a world that champions unity over division, understanding over conflict,